as a result of a couple of social groups coming together. And they themselves arose out of the social justice and civil rights movements of the 1960s. The leaders of various religious denominations, it was 11 largely Jewish and Christian denominations, although the Unitarian Universalists were part of the original founders as well. They came together and they saw a need for religious leadership and action in Milwaukee in the turmoil of the 1960s. In any event, they got together and formed what would eventually become the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee in 1970. At that time, a lot of the early programming and concerns of the Interfaith Conference concerned areas of discrimination, housing. These areas are still of concern and part of the Interfaith Conference programming, but it is not, we've kind of, as society has changed through the years, so the Interfaith Conference has changed through the years. The Islamic Society of Milwaukee was the first non-Christian, non-Jewish group invited to attend or become part of the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee. That occurred in 2003 in the wake of 9/11. Since then, we've added many other faith organizations, and from the original 11, we are up to 22 now. There were 2 Jewish groups that were part of the original group, but now there are 2 Muslim groups. There's Sikh, Buddhist, Baha'i, Hindu. I'm hoping that all of that is legible to you up on the wall. We have all of the mainline Protestant churches. The Episcopal Church was one of the founding organizations of the Interfaith Conference as well. We basically try to accomplish 2 things at the Interfaith Conference. The first thing that we try to accomplish is to convene religious leadership in the greater Milwaukee area. And it is our goal that if anybody has an office or a presence in the 5-county area of Milwaukee, Waukesha, Racine, Washington, and Ozaukee counties, we would like them to join. There are some kinds of churches, largely non-denominational evangelical churches, that are not so interested in what the mission of the Interfaith Conference is. The mission of the Interfaith Conference is to build relationships among people of faith, to promote greater understanding, dignity, and respect, and to advocate for the inclusion and acceptance of all. And we accomplish this in a few different ways. And so what I'm going to do is outline 4 or 5 of our major programs. Then I'm going to talk about some other things that we have done in the sense of statements and networking as well in the greater Milwaukee area, with an eye towards some things that we can do and some things that we're not able to do because of the nature of being an interfaith conference. I think one of the biggest misconceptions, though, of being an interfaith conference is that somewhere in Milwaukee there is an interfaith place of worship, and there's an interfaith prayer, and there's an interfaith service, and we kind of like get together and do a big group hug. Of course, that sometimes happens, but and then sing Kumbaya to each other. Well, that's not really the interfaith conference. What we do, though, is we stand together for certain values and principles that we all share in common. And if a tragedy occurs, we will stand side by side, and we will pray our different prayers side by side, and in that sense try to offer healing or an opportunity for reflection to those who attend at the greater Milwaukee community. So and actually one of the challenges towards being a member of the cabinet of the Interfaith Conference, each of the 22 faith organizations gets 3 representatives to the cabinet, which is the Interfaith Conference's board of directors. And the board of directors appoints a 9-member executive committee as well, and the 9-member executive committee hires an executive director who's in charge of the day-to-day functioning. So for those of you who are lawyers sitting out there and wanted to know the law stuff, that's how we work. But we also respect our individuality as well. And so our bylaws require that when there is a major issue that we sense that there might be conflict or difference of opinion on, our bylaws require that there be at least consensus. It doesn't have to be strict unanimity, but any of the 22 judicatories or 22 member organizations has the ability to veto any particular statement or even a program in an area. So one of the things that the people who work together on the Interfaith Conference, who sit on its cabinet, recognize is that we try to work for what we can easily determine to be common values and common goods. But if there are some areas, and there are areas that are hot topics in our society that come up, which we stay away from. So, for example, you will not find us issuing a statement on abortion. The Catholic position on abortion is clear, and on the other end of the spectrum, I'll just pick one, the Jewish perspective on abortion is quite liberal. For example, we would not be putting out a statement condemning abortion as sinful or not sinful, or that we would not be holding a program even on that issue, because likely it's going to deeply offend one or more of the groups. Some other areas that are problematic for the Interfaith Conference include Israel and Palestine. And so when October 7th happens, and then what happened after October 7th happens, the Jewish and the Muslim representatives of the organization, while they may talk behind the scenes about what's going on, and they do, they will not be issuing public statements or public programs. There are a couple in the LGBTQ area. You will not find us issuing a statement that this kind of conduct is or is not sinful. Again, the position of some of the groups on one side or the other is clear, whether it be open or affirming or a moral judgment from their religious teaching. But when we talk about these areas where we don't agree on issuing certain kinds of statements, there are other kinds of statements that we've been issuing for a long time and that we continue to issue. So we have an unequivocal state position against hate and violence. So if an anti-Semitic or an Islamophobic, or if the Orlando nightclub shooting or any other violence against one of these groups occurs, we condemn that from a violence, hate perspective as well, and we will stand together with each other at a program on that, even though you won't necessarily get us going farther from a theological, doctrinal perspective, because we respect the diversity in the room. So if you understand that about the Interfaith Conference, maybe you'll understand, and sometimes it's very frustrating as well. You have a situation in which somebody will say, what about this issue? Why aren't you speaking out on this? And if it's one of these 4 or 5 issues where we know we have loggerheads, then there's frustration. But believe me, the leadership at least discusses it behind the scenes as well. And that's really an important part of being on the Interfaith Conference cabinet. It's to develop that personal relationship so you can have discussions about issues. So if really a community-wide problem occurs, this is something that can be addressed as well. Now, we run a number of programs in order. Also, some are grassroots programs and some occur at other levels as well. And I'd like to talk about 4 or 5 of those. Yes, go ahead.
Before you start on the programs, could I ask a clarification question?
Sure.
Could you elaborate more on why the non-denominational churches may not be interested in participating?
My understanding is that they are more concerned about the ability to witness Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior and give that testimony they are to you, and that issues such as working on community-wide concerns, housing, discrimination, violence in an interfaith context is not what should be occurring. They're not against working in these areas, but they feel when people of different faiths can get together, the primary goal should be them being able to offer their testimony. And while the Interfaith Conference does do educational programs about different faiths, so like this is skipping ahead a little, but I'll answer this into the presentation right now. Like we did a program in June, webinar on how do our faiths treat the stranger. This is the 3rd time we've done this program in the last 10 or 15 years. And really there's not a lot of variety in the answer. I mean, all major faith groups regard that the strangers to be treated well and with kindness and justice. But in any event, so we will do programs like that that are side by side. Again, we don't choose the 4 or 5 programs that we can't get together on, that there's a very heated disagreement on. And I mean, sometimes that happens. One group might propose a program and another group will just say, no, not under these circumstances. It's very rare. It happens maybe once every couple of years we stumble into something that might draw an objection. But usually we are able to figure out what are the current issues that we want to talk about. Like we'll be having a program, we're planning one right now. The date isn't set, but it'll be various faith attitudes regarding the accumulation and maybe the possession of wealth. And we might try to put, again, it'll be like, we can't do 22, but we can do 8 or 9 talking for 5 minutes apiece. And of course, there's multiple representation in some areas. So we try to do programming that's relevant and interesting, and we can present different faith perspectives side by side. And often, of course, they might have the same perspective as well. One of the grassroots things that we try to do is our Amazing Faith Dinner Dialogue program. And this actually is probably our primary grassroots programming that we do. The Amazing Faith Dinner Dialogue is scheduled usually for the last Wednesday of every month. We put them up one at a time. Sometimes the schedule changes a little. So, for example, the last Wednesday in November is the night before Thanksgiving. We're not going to do that. And then on between Christmas and New Year's, whenever the Wednesday night falls, This year it's on New Year's Eve. We usually switch to a lunch event at an in-between date. But nonetheless, these events are regularly posted with, after the completion of the first one, they'll post the next one up on our website, which is interfaithconference.org. And in front of Bob are some Interfaith Conference brochures. It has the web information address as well as some of the programming information I'm going to go through. So how do the Amazing Faith Dinner Dialogues work? Well, what happens is we rotate it at different locations. And we hope to come to the Christ Church here pretty soon. And we usually put anywhere from 6 to 8 people at a table. There's a moderator at the table. It's an exercise in appreciative inquiry and appreciative listening. So what happens is the moderator, who is responsible for handing out the questions and keeping track of time but doesn't really participate themselves, they have a pre-prepared stack of cards of questions. One is handed out at a time. There are like 40 different questions, so you can't think about how you would answer the question because you're going to get a different question. So that helps the appreciative listening aspect of it instead of thinking about what I'm going to think about and say. And the purpose of the questions that are asked are really to try and get people to tell short stories about their life. So a question might be, I'm not going to be quoting anything exactly, but have you ever experienced compassion in your life? Was it something that you experienced from another or from you giving to another? And so there's these kind of open-ended questions, and it's just meant to get somebody to reflect on something that happened in their life. And then by the end of the evening, you might have gone around the table 2 or 3 times. Everybody gets 3, 4, 5 minutes, depending on how many people are at the table and where everything is at timing-wise. And what you do is, hopefully by the end of the evening, you will have had the experience of feeling that you actually shared something with a different person and background than you, that would be a positive experience for you. So that's our Amazing Faith dinner dialogues. They're usually it's somewhat dependent on the size of the location. We sometimes book at a location that the Trickle Bee Cafe, which is a Moravian food ministry on 44th and North. They give food. If you can afford, you can make a donation, and if you can't afford, you can just take the food. That's their ministry. They can only take 32 people. On the other hand, we've had a couple of large gatherings where we've had as many as 90 people in the room. A gathering of 35 to 45 people is much more common. One of our long-standing committees that runs program is called the Committee for Interfaith Understanding. It used to be called the Milwaukee Association for Interfaith Relations, and that committee goes back decades as well. Their main thrust is to do educational programming, and so they are the committee that would be responsible for organizing and finding presenters for like the program we did on June on how do we welcome the stranger, or the one on wealth that is coming up. Before that, they're going to do one on food, and I can't remember what the direction is on food. They do food ones all the time, but they like have a different focus. They decided not to do fasting. They decided to do something else, and I can't remember. Anyway, we post events on our website. This committee also has its own mission statement, which you can read in the back. up on the wall as well. Again, the Committee for Interfaith Understanding. Now, when it comes to the cabinet, the board of directors, these are organizational representatives. But our subcommittees include both organizational and individuals participating. We like to know if somebody's coming in representing a church or an organization to the committee, but we've also had people who just, we've come to know them, they've come to know us, and they participate even on an individual basis as well. Some of them, Bob, you were mentioning to me you were at Cardinal Stritch for a while, so Dan DiMizio, longtime theology professor at Cardinal Stritch, retired now, as I guess everybody might be from Cardinal Stritch, but that's another issue. And he's one of the regulars on that committee as well. Another one of our committees focuses on environmental issues. It also was formed decades ago, known then as the Interfaith Environmental Network. And they renamed itself the Interfaith Green Team. They adopted a mission as well, which is up there in the middle of the PowerPoint. They've even got a vision too, but I'm trying to limit it to one slide per committee here. They do different kinds of programmings. They have done a lot of what they call natural burial presentations for people who would like to have a more green planning of a burial. They occasionally try to arrange documentary film screenings regarding environmental topics. We did a documentary film called Cooked: Survival by Zip Code that was shown at the Times Cinema. I think it was probably last October or November or something like that. It was a film about how poor people or poor neighborhoods lack the structural resilience to deal with emergencies, climate emergencies. And in that case, there was, I don't know about nationwide, but there were hundreds of deaths in Chicago as a result of this one heat event that occurred in the mid-1990s, and then all the university professors and scholars and researchers and everybody took a look at what happened, and they found out that a lot of the inability to deal with climate issues and hardships actually has to do with the lack of resources in the community as well, and therefore disproportionately affects our poorer communities. We've done webinars trying, so under the Biden administration, there were some programs, the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, not to be confused with your individual retirement account. They also had a set of webinars that we helped them produce on how individuals and places of worship could take advantage of tax programs and or rebates. Another one of our regular programs is the Peace and International Issues Committee. They do a 4 or 5 week lecture series called Tuesdays in March over at First Unitarian here on North Astor on the east side of Milwaukee. We choose different topics every year. Our working title for 2025 is going to be something like Overcoming Chaos in Our Community. And we'll see where that goes. But in any event, that should be, the publicity will go up on our website and get emailed out, and that'll all probably come out towards the end of the year after our annual luncheon. We also do collaborate with government units where it's possible. So for example, this picture is of the Strong Baby Sabbath program in 2019, an initiative of the then mayor, Tom Barrett. And we also have had a lot of programs that we've done with Cavalier Johnson, who's come and spoken to our cabinet also on a couple of occasions. We did a peace program down at the Archdiocese site and put up a peace pole. These are just examples. Another thing that I think I must have hit the wrong button here. There we go. Another thing that we've done recently over this past year is we collaborated with Urban Rural Action of Wisconsin, and they had a 5-county wide area program going on. And in Milwaukee County, what we chose to do was to try to compile lists of community resources. The theory was that a lot of the problems in our community that is negatively impacts our community is the fact that even community organizations are in their own silos and they don't know what else everyone else is doing, and people don't know what's available, and there's frustration and anger and people get upset. So in Milwaukee County, we put together we chose to focus on 5 areas. That's probably almost illegible. There's a general resource list. If I stand in front of, no, that won't work. Domestic violence and family resources, food pantries and meal sites, healthcare, housing and senior services and transportation. But this, which is up on the Interfaith Conference website under the Community Resources tab, is just a 2-page handout with some of the more general information. So like, for example, the food pantries thing, there's Feeding America, Hunger Task Force, and 211. Each one of those 3 organizations with the link shown has an interactive map of Milwaukee showing the Interfaith, the Feeding America and Hunger Task Force interactive maps have more than 40 pantries on each of their sites, and 211 has more than 80 on its sites. And you can then go to the map and you can click and see who's near me, what hours are they open, what's their requirement. So the idea behind doing this, one of the things, one of the clergy groups that I work with down in southeastern Milwaukee County, mostly in the Bayview area, it's like, oh yeah, when something happens, I know I send them either here, here, or here. And I'm thinking, wow, 3 food pantry resources, there's a lot more than that. And people just don't know what's out there. So this is a 2-page cheat sheet that can be printed out on 1 piece of paper, and the pastor can put it on their desk. And if somebody comes in, where can I go for help, or where can I find these resources? That was the intent of that, but also on the website is a link to a spreadsheet with 140 organizations on it in all of these areas.
How often does it get updated based on the code?
Well, since this is a brand new effort, it's only been up on the website and was all verified out about a month ago, although I'm aware that at least one group, I think I saw in the paper, might be closing. It was a food group, but in any event, the thing to know, I think, for like somebody who's trying to help someone, if they have internet access. If they don't have internet access, it's going to be a little more hands-on. But at least, I can go to this website, because usually the question I get when somebody calls me at the Interfaith Conference, and we do not run a food pantry, but what we run into is that somebody says, I'm out of food. And I know the church in which we rent space for our office They have a meal program on Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, but I can't tell you if somebody runs out of food on a Wednesday where to go. And then it's good to have access to information where you could maybe search out that question. So any event, we also are trying to provide community resource information. We hosted an open house on August 26th at Redeemer Lutheran at 19th, and we had like a dozen organizations come in and table at that event. We called it Networking Across Milwaukee, Open Community Resource Open House. We hope to do it every year, and we hope to have a rollout of an updated list at the same time that we do that every year. So my commitment, as long as I have the position at the Interfaith Conference and we're putting this up on the website, is to make sure that it's updated at least annually. Probably when I was doing the presentation, I did a lot of the food pantry and senior services and transportation stuff. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that was out of date. You know, you'd call a number, and to me, if they had a website but it was no longer active and there is nobody answering the phone, they're off the list. They may still actually be there for all I know, but you know, one of the big complaints also when we heard when we were putting this together was, you know, the people would call somebody up and then they never get a call back. That's why it's really important to have more than one resource, because you never know who you're dealing with on the other line. You might have organization ABC, and they may be on the list, and then the person in a particular area is just kind of dropping the ball at that organization. Well, somebody might need help really desperately, and you want to give them more than one choice. This is a picture from one of our annual luncheons where we gave an urban ministry award to the Sikh community. We were very involved after the shooting in 2012 and on an annual basis, running helping them with the program that they ran down there as well. The annual luncheon, first Thursday in December usually. This year it's on Thursday, December 4th, big event. And of course, we also do statements of which, so this is a statement on this is on gun violence. So even though gun violence and gun control legislation, you might think that's controversial, but here's something the interfaith community can get together on. And I know that we are in favor of closing all loopholes in background checks. We're in favor of red flag laws, you know, taking guns away from people who might be mentally ill. And we're also in favor of safe storage. And I know when it comes time, when the organization that we're part of, the 80% Coalition, finally decides that they can tackle large capacity magazines, we will be on board with that as well, but they haven't even gotten that far. Here's another statement that was probably put out, I think, in 2010 or 2011, calling for a season of civility in Wisconsin. It begins, we, the undersigned leaders in Wisconsin's faith communities, know that democracy thrives on open and vigorous debate about public policies. However, as Wisconsin struggles through another year of divisive campaigning and elections, we are concerned that hostile political rhetoric is overstepping the bounds of civility and even decency in our congregations and society at large. It continues. This problem never goes away. I can find statements like this going back into the 1970s. See, what we respect the ability in this country to live with freedom and exercise the ability to practice our religion, and we also respect free speech. And so we respect free speech maybe even if we disagree with someone else's position. And I've given you a few positions on which we come together, which we can't come together. And yet we recognize the value of freedom and freedom of thought, freedom of the mind, from a religious and societal perspective. And here's some other areas that we have done statements on through the years. Actually, we have a log of our statements for the last 55 years. I think it's more than 200 pages right now of statements. We're trying to figure out how maybe we can put some more prominently on our website, and then on others, simply maybe make a searchable database. So that's a picture of some cabinet members who were at the meeting when I was formally made executive director in September of, but there's more than this. There are 22 faith organizations, up to 3 representatives per organization. Questions? Yes. Hold on, I guess you're going to have to get a microphone.
Yeah, in reading the list of organizations here, I noticed that only the ELCA and not the other major Lutheran bodies belong. So I'm wondering, when we say come down to the Islamic Society of Milwaukee, is that society composed of both Shiite and the other Sunni and other various small groups within the Islamic community?
So I will break that into 2 parts. So you're correct about the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which is a more liberally minded, shall we say, I don't know that they would choose that word, Lutheran congregation, and that the Missouri Synod and the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod do not participate for the reasons that I previously discussed, even though I used the word non-denominational. They also are not so interested in interfaith. I have a very good friend who is a Missouri Synod pastor. He retired last December. He said he's looking forward to participating in interfaith, but if he had done that while he was still a Missouri Synod pastor, he said they probably would have run me out of the church. And so the Islamic Society of Milwaukee has been around since 1982. And I represented them actually to the Interfaith Conference on the board from their admission in 2003 until 2022. And at the time that the Islamic Society was formed, and for the first 25 or 30 years, they had both Sunni and Shia members, and they always considered themselves to be Big Tent. In the last 15 years, the Shia community in Milwaukee has opened up 2 mosques, and most of their community attends one of those 2 mosques, but there's no problem if somebody who is Shia. Occasionally, some tragedy happens also that brings the 2 communities together as well. I think that the Sunni Shia split has bigger problems over back in the Middle East than it does in this country. Those differences and problems tend to not be of major concern in the Muslim community in this country.
I've got the microphone.
He's in
Yeah,
charge.
you're
He's
next,
going to
Brad.
take the last 20 minutes.
Yeah. I just want to thank you for being here today. It's really wonderful. But can we acknowledge? Thank you. Welcome. This is wonderful. I loved your mission statement. I'm impressed to see the number of religious faith traditions that are represented in that list. It was pretty impressive. And that last photograph you had of all those people there, I just applaud seeing a photograph like that. Here's the question I'm getting at. You're working on some various resolutions of things that we can work on together and agree upon, and staying away from some things that might be difficult for us to take on collectively. But I think in this world of polarization and growing division, which must make every person in that photograph you just showed up there want to cry, and makes me want to cry, that growing division. I think the very existence of this organization is something that can make us confident, give us hope. And I wonder, to what extent are you promoting, is the word getting out that this organization even exists, much less the individual recommendations and positions on moral and legal and other kinds of issues. Just the fact that here's these folks that are trying to figure out how we as human beings live together on this planet. How do we get that message out?
So one of the things that we did for the first time from last December through February was we did 3 months on WUWM. Now, obviously, that's a particular demographic, and so maybe there'd be 2 to 3 one of those announcements. Those of you who listen to public radio, we're in discussion right now about putting it up again for the end of the year and doing some of the programming, highlighting some of the programming that we're doing. But we're a small organization. We run our budget probably about, it's a $175,000 a year organization. About $100,000 is funded directly from the 22 faith judicatories, and the remainder of the $75,000 comes from programming and individual donations and the like. And we don't have an unlimited budget for advertisement. What does matter to us, what matters to me, is that the people who come to the room and represent those judicatories, that they actually take the information about these programs and back to their websites and offices and promote it. We will produce flyers, we will send out things electronically, but we do rely on each of our judicatories to reach, the people who might be interested at their faith organizations. Correct. Yeah, so we don't have to worry about all of this talk about, you're going to get your funding cut off if you don't do X, Y, Z. We don't need to worry about that. But we do have to worry a little bit about keeping our judicatories healthy and producing work that is of value to each of our judicatories. So I will go to different conferences like the Episcopal Diocese Conference up in Stevens Point coming up in the middle of next month. I'll see you there. Often we table, it seems like we table very close to each other up there. And I go to the American Baptist, the Quaker, UCC. I haven't made it to the Methodist one yet, but they have now, the UCCs and the Methodists were like hitting on the same weekend. That was a problem. But they've now take different weekends. So I try to catch, and I am often invited to speak at these conferences for just a few minutes, and I always try to emphasize to the people sitting out here the good work that your church is doing by supporting the Interfaith Conference. And I particularly acknowledge also this congregation, which donated $500 to the Interfaith Conference earlier this year and is giving an honorarium to the Interfaith Conference for my being here this morning. I really appreciate that.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you. So I really appreciate you here.
Thank you, Greg.
I appreciate the work of the conference. This is similar to Jim's question. I'm concerned about the rise, and I'm going to give it this label, which is kind of growing the Christian nationalism, but meaning a kind of Christian advocacy, if you will, isn't the right word, but it really is non-inclusive and very vocal, as opposed to just churches who say, well, okay, you're the interfaith, and we have our mission of advancing Jesus Christ, and so forth. And there's been a separation. But what I'm most concerned about is the rise of this kind of voice. And I wonder if that is affecting the interfaith conference, if you're actually seeing pushback
So,
toward the interfaith as an inclusive and tolerant, mission, as opposed to that is intolerant and non-inclusive.
so the Interfaith Conference, it's probably a statement I should have put in the presentation, has also condemned Christian nationalism. And so, I mean, again, this is something that all 22 of these organizations were willing to sign a statement on. I should have put that in my slide as well, and it certainly will make it to the website as well. Nobody's in the conference
I'm sorry, was that recently? You made that statement?
2-3 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
2-3 years ago, we participated in bringing in a speaker as well. We did a program with Reverend Jen Butler, who I think is American Baptist. I could be wrong. She came in, I think, in February of 23 and did like a 3-day program and then went to Madison. And it was about that time that we put the statement up on the website. You know, there's certain things that have to be led by certain groups. So, I mean, it doesn't really make a hill of beans to some people if you would get Jewish and Muslim, the non-Christian groups saying, oh, we're against Christian nationalism. This country should be for everyone. Everyone should be free to practice their faith. No, those statements and that effort was led by the Christian denominations. That was not driven. I mean, we were happy to sit there and vote for it, but it's like everybody knows that on certain kinds of issues, certain kinds of organizations have to lead on it. But in any event, yes, Christian nationalism, huge concern.
Could you describe, and I apologize if this happened in the introduction, but what led you to this work?
Well, I was born here into a Muslim family. My father was born in what was then the Crown Colony of India and is now Pakistan, the area that he was from. And so I grew up in this country. I was educated in this country. I'm culturally familiar with this country. But a lot of my community back at the time that I was growing up and was a young adult was not that way. Maybe they came from another country, maybe they were poor, maybe they weren't educated. And so if God gives you, as was reminded as a young adult by people who mattered to me, that if God has given you certain gifts, how are you going to give back with the gifts that God has given you? And so even before 9/11, I would go out and speak about Islam or whatever to different groups. And I never hid my religion to anyone, or why I didn't drink, or why I didn't do that, or why I did that. But 9/11 probably was the sea change event in my life, because at that point, it's either you have to stand up or you have to go under a rock. And, so my choice was to stand up and advocate for and protect and defend my community. And part of that was being affiliated with interfaith groups and going out and speaking and even standing up even more.
I have a question. Not a question. I'm going to give the office the information about your new spreadsheet about all the services that are around. And when I see you at convention in October, you should have a few copies of that to give to the Milwaukee area to hand out to clergy so they have it with them, not to forget about it.
So I'm thinking I have like 80 copies of the 2-pager at my office for that purpose. And if I run out before then, because I have to do the American Baptist Convention and the cabinet meeting before then, but if I run out, I'll print out more. What I won't do, I'm not going to print out the 140 spreadsheet. That's a really great idea. Is there a QR code on that thing? There will be by convention. Because maybe I'll hand out this is actually what's up on the website. So the question is, what is on the printout? But it's a good point. It's an excellent point.
You said that to me when I had a poster that you took a picture of last year. Said, the QR code is quicker.
That's true.
This is all really encouraging. Era and we're talking about representation at various conventions and among the different faith groups. But how about like at the end of the evening news, there's always we've heard 28 minutes in the half hour of bad news, violence and hatred and despair, and there's usually 2 or 3 minutes of good news at the end. They want to kind of leave you with a little bit of hope. And what about if they say, here's something that's hopeful. Here in Milwaukee and the state of Wisconsin, we've got all of these faith groups that are working to, right there you've said, a greater understanding, dignity, and respect. And I bet there's a lot of people, maybe people who aren't religious at all, of any of these faith groups, who would say, that's encouraging to me. I'm excited about that. How that gives me hope. How do we promote that kind of thing generally in our culture? Anyway, just getting it in front of a larger group of people.
Even our Amazing Faith Dinner Dialogue, what's posted up on the website, is people of all faiths and no faith are welcome to gather and share a meal. So, we do not try to, yes, I suppose we're not going to be admitting an atheist group as a member of the Interfaith Conference, but, short of that, we are certainly happy to engage people in dialogue, and our stand against hate and violence against anyone is unequivocal.
I'd like to
Even
ask,
Charlie Kirk. I honestly believe there's a right time to say something and a wrong time to say something, and you learn this in interfaith as well. So it's the man was murdered. There are people, their family who cared about him. You might think he had a lot of faults to him, and some of his ideas might upset you greatly. But the time to talk about those ideas is not right after not after something like this happens. If you want to debate his legacy months or years down the line, that's fine, but there's a time and a place. And one thing you learn in interfaith conference is that sometimes things are too raw, and so you know, I'm not going to go in and talk on an issue where people are dying right now, and then expect that it's not going to draw an emotional response. Of course, you've got to. So, I mean, part of the exercise of the Interfaith Conference and building relationships is, you know, it takes time and judgment and wisdom as well.
You certainly represent that well and what the organization does. Let's thank Ahmed for his presentation.
And thank you so much, Bob, for this opportunity to come speak to your group. And I hope that everybody has a great Sunday afternoon. I'd love to come see you again, maybe as soon as an Amazing Faith Dinner Dialogue.
I was going to say another thing.